of the conference. For this panel, we'll be discussing affordable energy goals. How can Labour deliver affordable energy for people this year and beyond? This is obviously a topic that's been in the news quite a lot recently, with debate around the winter fuel payments, as well as some encouraging measures as well announced at a conference on energy efficiency standards for housing as well. So there's lots to digest, lots of relevant topics to discuss in this area, and I'm joined by an illustrious panel with a big wide range of expertise to dig into it. I'm Sam Robinson, Senior Researcher at Social Market Foundation. So in case you haven't heard of Social Market Foundation, we're an independent cross-party think tank. We're doing a wide range of research in different public policy areas. Before we dive into it, a little bit of housekeeping. So firstly, if a fire breaks out, then don't stay in this room. Follow the green man. The green man knows where he's going. You'll also might have noticed there's
the greatest fire directions I've ever.
You may have also noticed a camera in the corner there. So this event is being live streamed on YouTube. So if you want to capture the moment, if you want to ask a particularly brilliant question, you'll have a souvenir of it. You can watch it back on the internet and show it off to people if you so wish. And you can follow the debate online by using our Twitter tags, or X tags, I suppose I should say, at SMF Think Tank, and also at NEA_UK Charity and at Fair by Design. That's National Energy Action and Fair by Design, who are kindly sponsoring this event and making this discussion possible. So that I believe is the housekeeping out of the way. And just to introduce the speakers we have today. On my left over here is Adam Scorer. Adam is the Chief Executive of National Energy Action. And he's something of a consumer rights champion, having had roles at Which, Energy Watch, Consumer Focus, and Citizens Advice. And next to Adam is Maria Booker, who is head of policy at Fair by Design, and worked in a trifecta of government, in the charity sector and the private sector. So including being private secretary to the energy minister, so a broad range of experience to draw on. I'm also joined by a couple of the new intake. So next to me is Jeevun Sandher, MP for Loughborough, who has a constituent here, which hopefully you won't get heckled too hard. Jeevun is, as well as on top of being an MP, instrumental in the New Economics Foundation, and lots of work there, as well as working in GWP and Treasury. And finally joined by Dr. Sam Rushworth, who's the new MP for Bishop Auckland. So before we get round to the rest of the panel, I'd like to also introduce Caroline Cawley. So Caroline is a member of End Poverty Edinburgh, who are a group of citizens with experience of poverty, working to raise awareness of the challenges, the issues around poverty in Edinburgh, and hopefully and influence decision making and hold decision makers to account. So I think I'll invite Caroline if you want to start us off with a few words.
Yeah, I'll just stand at the end if that's all right. So, as stated, I am Caroline Cawley. Please forgive the croakiness, it seems to be perpetual at the moment. I live in Edinburgh, and for anyone who has enjoyed visiting Scotland, which is a beautiful country, you will know that it's extremely cold. And it's expensive because it's so cold. I live in a council-owned high-rise, and it's a high-rise, no gas, only electric. It was built in 1960, so there is no insulation. Trust me, after Grenfell, we got a lot of letters going, don't worry, you don't have any insulation. So that was good. They had that kind of, well, yeah, we're safe, but yeah, we're also cold. My block of flats is filled with damp and mould, and it is far from the only block like that. A lot of social housing throughout the whole of the UK has been underfunded and left to rot, in some cases quite literally. Now, everyone knows the damage that black mould does to you, and one of the ways you can get rid of it is by having a warm home. Excuse me. But how can you have a warm home when you only have electric storage heating, which is really expensive to run, and quite frankly isn't very good anyway? And the tariffs just keep getting higher and higher and higher for electric. I, until recently, was pay as you go. Now that was a challenge all by itself. I had a key. I had to pay with cash, because no one would let you pay with card. So I had to go to one place for cash, have my cash, and then find a shop where I had a key meter. And then I could put the money straight onto the key, go home, put it into my electric meter. If the power cut out for any reason, and I wasn't in credit, I was in the emergency, that was it. Power was gone. It would not be turned back on until I was back in credit. There was no, we will not turn off the electric between midnight and 6. So that was a fun experience. It only happened to me once, and luckily I was able to get electric the next morning, but I had no electric. And I've now recently moved on to direct debit, which I don't like because the energy companies therefore keep my money, which I need. I can't afford for them to hold on to my money when I could be using it to pay other bills. But if I don't do that, my tariffs are so much higher. My costs have gone down £10 per month just because I'm no longer pay as you go. Usage has not changed. Even the amount just for having the meter, that's nearly 20p difference on a day-to-day basis. It's a smart meter. You don't have to come out and change things. They press a button in their office. Why does that cost an extra 20p a day? I was like, oh, I'll pay my bill. No, they charge you extra for having a bill, for having a paper bill. So the only way to keep it affordable is to allow electric companies to keep hold of the money, any credit that I have, without me being able to access it. If you're low income, mine, I think at the moment I'm about £90 in credit. £90 is a lot of money to me. It should be a lot of money to most people, but there are very fortunate people who've never had to experience having to pay for electric and having to try and really get everything out of the can for every penny. But in my area, there are people who rely on food banks just to eat. They don't have the money to be paying these electric bills. They're so high. And I just found out mine's going up by £60 next year. Where am I going to find that £60? It's a lot of money to find. There are children in my area. There's one little boy who said to his mum, oh mum, my friend, he's really rich. I said, what do you mean he's really rich? He lives just round the corner. I said, yeah, but they don't have to wear their coats when they eat their tea. There are people not keeping on their fridge freezers because it's too expensive to run. And they cost pennies per day, but that's just how expensive it is. And if you're cold, it affects you mentally, it affects you physically. You're more likely to get sick, you'll get sick for longer. So you'll end up in hospital. Everyone I know in my area has respiratory illnesses almost constantly because they can't keep warm, they can't keep dry. And obviously, I don't know how prevalent they are in other areas, but we have a lot of warm banks. So you get to bundle yourself up, take yourself off to a community centre in the hopes that you'll stay warm, along with everybody else in the middle of flu season and with COVID floating around. And then once that place shuts, you get to bundle back up and you get to go back home to your cold, miserable house or flat. It's not fair. Why are the poorest people paying the most? Why are we being constantly penalised for being poor? No one asked to be in poverty. And it really can happen to anyone. You do not know what life is going to throw your way. And if you have any assets, they're the first thing to go. And once they're gone, there's nothing. It's only what's available through benefits. And it's been proven by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the current levels of universal credit is £35 a week, too low to just afford the basics. That's to exist, that's not to live, that's to exist. So if you want to make it fairer, you need to really, really reduce the price of essentials. And electric, you need gas if you're living in an accommodation that has it. So that would be my big message is, if you want children to stop being cold, to be able to do well in school, to be able to have hot meals when they get home, because they can actually afford to put the oven or the cooker on, you've got to reduce energy prices, because at the moment, people are getting really, really sick. Thousands die every year just of the cold. It's the most vulnerable that pay, but it's also the most vulnerable that pay the most. And to be clear, this isn't just a poverty premium in finance terms. It's a poverty premium in time, the amount of time it costs to go get cash, then to find a shop that's got a key. And that usually involves a bus journey, so there's that extra physical expense, but just waiting around for the buses as well. But it's also about dignity. How is it fair to make people have to leave their home just so they can go somewhere in the hopes of getting warm? Mm-hmm. It's not okay, it's not fair, and the system has to change.
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, that's a vivid kind of description, I think, of the scale of what we're, the scale of the problem with fuel poverty. And so perhaps, Adam, I'll bring you in just to sort of set the scene a bit in terms of, you know...
The scene has been set.
Yeah.
I can't follow that. I want to take Caroline around with me to everywhere I go, because that was the perfect encapsulation of the challenge that we face. Thank you so much for that. Caroline, in broader terms, the experience of it has grown since, you know, we think about the duration of the energy crisis, we think around 4 million households in fuel poverty before the crisis. That's having to spend at least 10% of your income to be able to afford a decent level of heat and power. It's around 6 million households right now, and the impacts of those are exactly as Caroline describes. It is about privation, you know, going to bed early, not heating rooms, not being able to cook hot food, not being able to wash clothes, all those sorts of issues. Or it's the accumulation of impossible levels of personal household energy debt. It ranges at about 3.4 billion households concentrated into the households that can least afford to shoulder that burden. And much of that is arrears. It's not repayment plans, you know, where you've had a conversation with a customer about how they're going to be able to pay it back. It's just arrears to companies. So the experience that people have had over the past few years has been extreme. We also need to remember that it didn't start with the excessive gas demand for China after the pandemic or the invasion of Ukraine. People have been in crisis with fuel poverty issues for a very long time, and they will remain in crisis after this happens. The problem that we've had, I think, in the crisis has been trying to find the quick expedient ways of throwing a bit of money, a lot of money at the problem and trying to get us through in a sticking plaster way, and we need many more enduring solutions. So what can we do about it? We work with Fair by Design on calling for a social tariff. Maria will talk about that in some greater depth. I'll just focus on some other issues. For a new Labour government with really clear mission about eradicating fuel poverty and taking action, great statement from Ed Miliband yesterday on renters, but the whole package we need to address. So look, there's no getting away from it. This winter is going to be incredibly hard for people, and some of the support mechanisms that are in place have fallen away, and unless we find ways of providing immediate financial assistance to those people in jeopardy of those circumstances that Caroline describes, we're going to have much more winter illness. We're going to have many more kids unable to go to school because they're not feeling kind of well enough, many more respiratory conditions. The NHS is going to be flooded with people taking those difficult choices. So there is an issue this winter. And the mechanisms exist. I'm not trying to invent a new delivery mechanism for support, whether it's warm home discount, whether it's kind of support for people on PPMs, vouchers to pay, whatever they are, we're going to have to find some ways of doing it, but we can't just live at the level again of what we can do this winter. So some of the other things that I think we need to put in place. The debt issue is crippling so many households at the moment. So we have clients where their debt is higher than their expected annual expenditure on energy for a year. You know, you cannot pay this off. This is there, and it inhibits any other relationship with a supplier. If you want a prepayment meter, that debt gets sucked off your bill before you're even starting to charge the meter and pay it. So there has to be action on debt in a couple of ways. One is about the ways in which suppliers support through repayment plans and support to customers, but we just have to accept that we need to accelerate people off problem energy debt, whether it's about a customer paying £1, the supplier paying £1, the government paying £1. Unless we have an accelerated way out of this household energy debt problem, the small measures that we put in place for affordability are going to get sucked up in debt repayment. So we have to find a structured way of doing that. The other issue, and it's live, isn't it, today, because of the issue around winter fuel payments, is the hard edge of having means-tested benefit as the proxy for people who are struggling to pay their energy bills. So the crisis gave us one lesson, is that the challenge is much, much broader than that. So people with medical conditions, with disability, with families who are in their homes for longer, the jeopardy, the sense of jeopardy, exposure to the risk of not being able to afford your energy bills is so much broader than a transactional issue. I mean, homes aren't transactional kind of spaces. They're not even low carbon abatement spaces. They're where we live. You know, they should be places of comfort and refuge and respite, God forbid us, joy, sociability, and they're not that. And so we have to have a sense which is broader than just your income hits that hard means-tested benefit level, there you're eligible, anything else you're not. We have to have a broader sense of it. It was great that Ed spoke yesterday about action on renters, so minimum energy efficiency standards for people in rent. That's a fundamental plank of any challenge to the issue around fuel poverty, but it's not enough. You know, we need to have that warm homes plan, that investment in people's homes, mobilised with supply chains, targeting the worst first, people in the greatest need, or we don't have a plan to tackle the long-term cost of living crisis and the cost of energy. I'd say one thing for Labour, new Labour MPs. There is a crying need to understand this problem, as Caroline said, kind of beautifully put. To understand this problem, you've got to get in the homes of people before and after, to understand the challenge of living in damp homes with mould, what it means for your life, and then what it's like when there's solutions to it. Because I tell you, they will not be talking to you about carbon. They will talk to you about cost, but it won't be about that. It will be about having a mother's birthday party at my house this time for the first time in years because I felt able to do it. There'll be a sense of comfort and pride in their homes. It will be about, like, you know, not how many GP visits you've been able to avoid. That is the benefit, that is the value of taking action to make energy bills affordable, but in a way that makes homes places of pride and comfort and joy again. And unless we get a sense of capturing that, rather than thinking it in purely transactional terms of income and expenditure or of carbon abatement, we will lose this emerging sense of mission across Labour of tackling fuel poverty and the cost of energy once and for all. So I think that's a great thing that every new MP, and thank goodness there's so many of you around this place, should take off. Go and find a place in your communities, in your constituencies, where you can go and have that visit, because that is the way that the testimony of Caroline and the experience of so many people, but what a solution would actually mean for affordable bills will really come out to you.
Fantastic. And picking up on social tariffs and the property premium.
Thank you. So Sam said, I'm head of policy at Fair by Design. For anybody who is not familiar with Fair by Design, we aim to get rid of the poverty premium. So that's the extra money that people on low incomes pay for essentials like energy, but also insurance and credit. And we're really pleased to see the end of the prepayment meter premium last year. It was a really important step forward. We're still campaigning to get rid of the £112 you currently pay extra for paying just by paying on when you receive your bill. So that's an ongoing push for us. But you might ask, what has a social tariff got to do with poverty premiums? So when Care by Design as a campaign was started in 2018, it was built off the back of a piece of research done by the University of Bristol, looking at costing each element of the poverty premium. And at that time, the biggest element of the poverty premium was that loyalty premium from not switching energy supplier. So that's where our interest and our desire to see a social tariff came from. It actually preceded the energy crisis, and NEA and ourselves have been calling for a social tariff for some time to get rid of that loyalty premium, and of course the urgency has only increased since then. So it's clear that we can't get a social tariff in place in time for this winter, and as Adam has alluded to, there is some real need for some short-term support this winter, and Fair by Design fully supports the need to extend the warm home discount to people on disability benefits, and also to increase the amount of that discount as well. We also fully support the need for a help to repay scheme to give people hope that they can climb out of the vast amounts of energy debt that people are in at the moment. But at the moment we've been firefighting for some time, and we can't carry on like that. I think Caroline explained so eloquently why energy is an essential. We all need an amount of energy that keeps us safe and well, and we all deserve to be able to access that at an affordable price. And that's why we need a long-term sustainable solution. So we've looked at a social tariff in detail, and what we would like to see is a social tariff that's mandatory for all energy suppliers. We'd like to see an energy social tariff that's targeted at those in the greatest need, and as Adam has explained, we think that has to go beyond people on means-tested benefits. 4 in 10 households in the poorest fifth of the population aren't on benefits at all. And we also know that income and energy usage are not closely related. So there's some people who have a really high need for energy, often related to having a disability or a long-term condition, and they need help with that extra burden. It's an essential for them. We also think that households who are eligible should be automatically enrolled on a social tariff. We know that that really helps with uptake. The history of social tariffs in the UK has shown that when you don't automatically enrol households, you tend to get a much lower take-up, and it's hard to get people to fill in the forms and to engage them in that process. And we also think that a social tariff needs to be funded progressively, so ideally funded by taxation rather than being placed as an additional cost on consumer bills. So with those guiding principles, we think that a discount on the unit rate is the best way to give a social tariff. But we're also completely open to having that conversation. What we'd really like to see is the government publishing a consultation and hearing all the different views on what social tariff would work best. We recognise that the social tariff that we want requires better data matching. There are good sources of data out there. We know that the government knows a lot about individuals and the income that people are on, the benefits that people are on. We know that energy suppliers know a lot about households, so how much energy they're consuming when they're coming off supply. And we really need to combine those data sources so we can target people who are most in need. This sort of work has been talked about for a long time. The warm home discount provides a precedent of sorts. It's a good building block to go forward from. And also the work recently on child benefit and linking that to income is a helpful precedent as well. If this sort of data matching had been in place at the time of the energy crisis, we could have put in place much more targeted support, which would have cost a lot less than the energy support that was put in place. But we are where we are, and this work now needs to be prioritised. We think there's also a discussion to be had about whether there's a staging post to that social tariff in terms of having a less ambitious proposal to start with that might be targeted at people on benefits. Earlier this year we commissioned a report from the Fabian Society. It's a report called Cost Cutters, and recommend taking a look at that, so it's a good read. And it contains a fully costed proposal about a 20% energy social tariff that would be targeted at those on means-tested benefits, but wouldn't cost any more on bills. And we think that could be a good potential first step forward. And finally, I think it's really important that we have a commitment from the new Labour government to a social tariff as soon as possible, because of the pace of the future changes that are coming down the path to get us towards net zero. So from next year, we'll start to see the introduction of market half-hourly settlements, which, as we know, will increase the incentives on consumers to consume energy at an off-peak time. And that raises important questions about the future of the energy price cap, the future of default tariffs. But it's quite hard to have those conversations without having that safety net of a social tariff in place. So it's really important there's a commitment to that as soon as possible, so that we can start looking at these other really important decisions, knowing that people aren't going to fall through the gaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So I'll bring in Sam next. I've lots to pick up on there.
Yeah, there is. Thank you. Also, thank you, Caroline, for her excellent talk at the beginning, and absolutely hear you about that sort of the damp and mould. I've got a constituent at the moment who has pulmonary fibrosis, which he believes was caused by that, and he's a single parent, and won't live to pension age as a result. And I make that point actually because I think something that I feel like the country's lost its collective head in recent weeks on the issue of fuel poverty, and there's people need to understand who actually is in fuel poverty. The people most likely to be living in cold homes in this country are children, children in single parent households, and students in houses of multiple occupancy. And but that's not to suggest that there aren't people in fuel poverty across the whole sort of demographic of society. So I feel that we need, well, two thoughts really for today. One is, people don't live in fuel poverty because we fail to take enough taxpayers' money and stick it into little packages of benefits here and there and dole it out to people. People live in fuel poverty because their incomes are too low and their energy bills are too high. And it's important we understand that, because if we're looking for a long-term solution, we have to address both. We have to address the need for decent wages and pensions, and I think that some of the things that you heard at Labour's conference and that we're doing around a new deal for workers, but also that commitment to the triple lock is really important, because we need to make sure that everybody actually just has a decent income. But we also need to address why bills are so high. And we need, and I think Jeevun probably in a moment will talk more than I will about this, about sort of long-term plans for how do we reduce bills. And it's looking at ending our reliance on overseas fossil fuels, and it's looking at making homes warmer. And so there needs to be a long-term strategy to get people's bills down for good and to get wages and pensions up for good. Of course, that doesn't mean that there aren't short-term pressures, and because that's a long-term strategy, we do need to consider this winter and the next. And the thought on that really, I think we need smarter benefits. If you were to design a system to address fuel poverty through the benefit system, simply through a cash transfer to somebody who may need help paying their bill, you would not say that everybody over the age of 66 is going to get an annual payment and everybody below 66 isn't, and that those above 66 will get it even if they live in Spain, if they're a UK pension. You wouldn't do that,
They don't
right?
get it in Spain.
You wouldn't design that system, and you wouldn't either have a system that doesn't look at how cold it is, what type of house somebody lives in. So I represent the snowiest constituency in England, and whilst Scotland's cold, only the Auckland Islands, Shepshed Islands and the Cairngorms are snowier than parts of my constituency, because it's in the upland areas of County Durham. We have people in fuel poverty who are wage earners, in full-time work, simply because it's so expensive to heat their homes. And we have people, again, across every demographic in fuel poverty. We also have a challenge of a lot of homes that are off-grid. And that creates a challenge. I mean, people with prepayment meters understand this. Some people don't actually have the ability to go into debt to their energy company. If you need oil to heat your home and you can't buy your oil, and I've met people in this position, both pensioners and non-pensioners in this position, where they're waiting for their next paycheck because they can't actually buy the oil to replenish their heating. So their heating simply just isn't on. They can spend a week or 2 weeks in the winter without their heating on until they can afford to buy more oil. So I think there's some serious challenges here. One thing I'm pushing the government on, and is the warm homes discount. I think it's a smarter benefit. It's smarter because it looks at your bill, it looks at the type of house you live in, it's got wider eligibility criteria, but I think that could be broadened further as well. So I think we need to look at using the data that we have to actually consider basically what is a person's bill, what kind of home do they live in, and what is it costing them to heat that home as a function of their income. And frankly, in the days of that we live in, with the AI and all sorts of tools available, we should be able to do this better than we're doing it. Just one response to Adam, I hear your point about kind of the need for MPs to go in homes and see the mould and the damp and so on. I'll push back just slightly though.
And the difference when it's better.
Yeah, and the difference. Because one of the things that I find quite frustrating as a new MP is this sort of widespread feeling that MPs don't live in the real world. I grew up in child poverty. I grew up in a home where there was no central heating, where there was no double glazing, where there was ice on the inside of my bathroom window. I know what it's like to see mould on the wall. But even in my adult life, we're a big family. I'm the single breadwinner for a family of 7. And even a year ago, I met the legal definition of being in fuel poverty because I live in a house that's built in stone, built in 1550, and it cost me about £600 in December just to heat our home. And so I said it because what did we do? We didn't put the heating on. I get Raynaud's, and I know what it's like to sit at my desk with my hands really cold and struggling because I feel like I can't afford to put the heating on more than I'm doing. So not every member of Parliament is from some sort of elite privileged background where we don't live with this. We have family members who are in fuel poverty at the moment, and yeah, I've seen the difference as well. And I think one of the things that we'll be doing in my team, and maybe Jeevun probably knows more about this than me, but the plan to insulate homes to make them warmer. At the moment, I'm picking up a lot of cynicism from the public about that. I think there's a sort of sense that we've seen it all before, that we're not, and there's this real sort of fear that it's only going to go to people on means-tested benefits, and that the people who are just above those thresholds are not going to get that support, or they're going to be asked to pay amounts that they can't afford. So the design of that is really important. We have to make sure that policy is designed in a way that is accessible to everybody. My staff, I'm going to put a whole staff member on this, is basically to kind of work with communities to do that, both to help poorer communities access community power schemes and to help poorer communities to access this sort of street-by-street approach, because it does seem at the moment that there's a sort of gap in those who actually have the capability to access some of that support available to do that long-term insulation. But I'll leave it there, but I just think we've been getting this wrong for a long time, that we need to look at all of those things in the round.
Thanks, Sam. So coming finally to Jeevun, I suppose Sam alluded to this. What do we do in the long term to
get our bills down?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, first of all, good morning, and thank you so much for all being here so bright and early. People are looking very fresh, I see, on the 3rd or 4th day of conference. Good to see you all got early nights last night, I can tell. I think the main thing to say is that let's think about what happened in the past 2 years, I suppose, specifically after Putin's invasion of Ukraine. We had the highest energy bill increase in the G7, the highest electricity price in the G7, the highest inflation in the G7, because we are dependent upon natural gas to heat our homes and because we are dependent on, or rather we have the worst insulated homes in Western Europe. So those are the two fundamental causes of why we were so much worse hit than any other nation. Now, like, I can slag off the Tories, say it's because of David Cameron in 2013 saying we should cut the green crap, and it was, and we should blame them, and politically we will always put it out their doorstep, but going forward the question is, how do we address those two issues? And what you've seen over this conference, indeed, I know Ed has obviously spoken about it yesterday, I think was his speech, but of course has actually been speaking about it for years, which is, how is it we ensure that we get those prices down? The first of which is through GB Energy, so our clean energy company that will ensure that we get to a fully renewable grid by 2030. Now, I would say that does of course also include nuclear, and there's another key part of this as well, which is as well as building the wind farm, the solar panels, which we will build, and we will build, by the way, in the face of those who do protest against them. Future generations will not thank us for protecting of you if we do not protect this planet. We will absolutely be building those, and I know my constituency, when they come up, I'll be on the bulldozer, like let's get going. And we need to have pylons as well. By the way, it's bonkers that people are protesting against pylons. I drive down a motorway and I see pylons all the time. I mean, it's just bonkers. But in order to do this stuff, in order to get to clean energy, we do have to build those things. We have to build renewable sources. We will have to have more nuclear, and we'll have to ensure as well that we're having the transmission of that power to move around. On top of that, of course, renewable sources, but solar wind in particular, of course, intermittent heat sources, and therefore we would have to think about what will a new national grid end up looking like. And part of that is transmission, but part of that is also around storage, which is why also, of course, on the other side of GB Energy, you also have the National Wealth Fund that's also going to co-invest those technological solutions to ensure we can store and transmit electricity. Now that is an opportunity, or rather I would say a necessity for this nation, indeed any nation going forward. But beyond that as well, given that we want every single country in the world to get to a net zero power system, it is also an opportunity here to innovate and sell those opportunities across the globe. Sam has spoken a little bit about how we also need to raise incomes in order to do this. And one of the reasons we know that investing in this kind of transition, or rather transformation, does lead to rising wages and rising incomes is because we're already seeing it happen inside the United States. The United States is a huge amount of their clean energy power plan. They are the fastest growing economy in the G7 since COVID. We are the second slowest. Not only are they the fastest growing, not only are wages growing in the middle, wages are specifically growing at the bottom of the distribution, and also those areas that have been traditionally locked out of economic prosperity, specifically outside of major cities. More broadly, with the energy transition, what we are talking about here is the physical transformation of our world. So whereas, if you like, after 1980s, economic activity mainly focused, or are the centres of it in major cities, graduates working together in London, in New York, and San Francisco, and the areas outside being left behind, what we are now talking about is physically transforming our nation, which by necessity means building and creating jobs and incomes and prosperity in areas that previously did not have them. And of course, we know in this country, for example, where the outlying areas of economic activity in the last 30 or 40 years used to be coastal areas. Well, of course, we also know on the other side, we have a huge wind potential, and of course, that wind potential is mostly offshore. So we are talking about, for example, Grimsby has seen a huge increase, influx of economic activity since then, and of course, this government has also rightfully banned onshore wind. So those are ways in which in the long term we will be getting down energy bills. And on top of that, of course, not only about the cost of electricity or energy coming through your, pipe, but actually
Wire.
Although it can be a pipe with hydrogen, I would say I have a hydrogen sector of my constituency, so let's all remember hydrogen. I'll talk about that at some future point. But on top of that, the Warm Homes plan to ensure that actually we are insulating homes and using it efficiently. Anything we can do to ensure that actually whatever power we're using is used in a more, a more efficient manner, that we're getting more out of it per pound, also ensures that we're dealing with these issues of fuel poverty and energy use. And I suppose on the broader kind of macro ideal of this, money that we're spending on energy, it doesn't tend to go in the pockets of those who are workers, etc. It's going on to be like a capital expenditure. And actually, the more money we can take out of your energy bills and you spending down the local shop is more money in your local economy. And similarly, and more broadly, of course, moving away from being dependent on fossil fuels supplied by dictators abroad is also money that we're leaving here, and also lower costs for businesses. And for all of us, the best news of all, the lower price of a pint. So that's what's before us, not just a pint, but actually lower energy bills for all. A clean grid, the transition and the technological improvements to sell that across the globe and using energy more efficiently. I really look forward to this Labour government doing it. Off we go. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. So I think we have 10-ish minutes for questions. So I'll take them in threes. So come to Devon, over here, and over there. So Devon, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks. I'm Devon. I'm the Director of Policy and Practice, and one of the people that helped develop universal credit just over a decade ago. And I was really struck by the drive that actually the means tested benefit system is not targeted enough. There's people outside of it that also need that support. So I guess rhetorically, at what level of income do you think you stop claiming universal credit? Because it's quite a bit higher than people imagine. Like if you've got kids, if you're renting, it's pretty well targeted, and not just because I helped work on it. There's a few elements of it that you could refine, but I guess the question is like, why are we certain that that's what needs targeting rather than perhaps people's attitudes toward it? And for pensioners it's slightly different, by the way, but maybe that's the point. And what would you like to see? How would you like to see it go further? Because I think that's a really interesting area of reform, but before you go down that path, you need to be absolutely certain it's not already reaching those people.
And then a question in the second row.
Hi, my name is John. I am Head of ESG Sustainability G2 Group. We are a national housing plan provider. Thank you very much, guys, for your talk. I really enjoyed it. I see that every single day. Jeevun mentioned around the 6.6 billion warm homes plan. What's really interesting, what Caroline said in the story, is a massive link between housing and health. 1.4 billion gets spent every single year on NHS, on damp and mould homes. But if you look at it in terms of the wider societal costs, it's 15.4 billion. That was what the government actually put out there in the House of Commons paper. For me, does the panel believe that 6.6 billion for the warm homes plan is too short, since we could potentially be spending further on the realised gains for the NHS, and also as well, in light of 51% of homes that are currently under EPCC, are we only just focusing about growth when we should be also focusing on the reduction of energy as well to ensure a net zero future?
Right, we'll have one more question from the gentleman there.
Yeah, I'll try and find a question, of course. I end up making their own speeches in front of me. Yeah, there's an interesting point that Marie was talking about social tariffs, and then Sam, you were talking about smart benefits. So I'm Robert Cameron, who's Director of Regulation and Consumer Affairs at Utilita. We don't believe that a social tariff is the way forward. That's something that should be an issue, but we think there's a lot of mantra, a lot of default conversations about social tariff as it's a given and expected norm. Won't take this opportunity now, but we think social discount, much in the way actually that Sam was talking about, is a more appropriate, targeted, much better system, targeting the right people in the winter. This is a winter issue, it's not an all year round issue, but not the place to get into the detail about that. My colleague, my gentleman made here about the impact on the NHS is significant. We all know that. And what that really plays into is trying to get on the question here. How can Labour deliver for the energy bills? So there's two aspects of that. Macro, which you talked about there. Jeevun about big macroeconomics, and then today's issue for consumers. I made this speech yesterday, so forgive me if you've heard it before. Absolutely critical that we deliver something this winter. This winter. We can do something a bit more sexy and sophisticated around social tariffs or not, smarter benefits or not. This winter, all energy suppliers have existing infrastructure based on what the Conservatives brought in 2 winters ago, which they got a lot of love for, so you can get some for that. Around warm home discount, any tweak of most suppliers, I can speak for my own at least, most suppliers can land stuff within 4 to 6 weeks at the outside if they're given the go, around targeted pre-existing criteria to impact those most vulnerable. The company I work for, by definition, is a prepaid supplier. I'll speak to you afterwards, Caroline, by the way, to help you with some of the issues there. That's a dreadful situation we described. those by any definition are the most impacted in society, and we're just one energy supplier. That reach is right there, right now, and the funding is just required to do it. And Miata is already in that space because she was at the space yesterday. I'm just letting you go know first hand that energy suppliers are ready to go. We're ready to go. It doesn't need to be reinvented. We can do something this winter, pre-Christmas actually, if it was now, but certainly in January, if it's a couple of weeks when Treasury works out, which means they've got in November.
Great. So yes, we've got a challenge on benefits targeting, a challenge on social tariffs and societal costs in the NHS. So, do you want to?
I will. And Dan's point. I mean, for me, it's less about the sufficiency and the design of UC or pension credit. It's more about it passporting into energy bill support mechanism. So warm home discount, about what the trigger, what the passport mechanism is, and that which is too harsh. So warm home discount is a finite pot. You know that some people get it automatically if you're on guaranteed element of pension credit. Other people have the supply got enough money left in it, and it's only gone up £10 since it's been incepted. So it's not whether the design of those particular benefit systems is either too tight or too generous. It's how do you get people in greatest jeopardy and risk into that kind of broad ecology of support that's available from energy suppliers. For me, as a fuel poverty organisation, that's the challenge, and about whether that is sufficiently well designed. On the housing issue, no, 6.6 probably isn't enough, and it's not enough to meet your targets, but it's difficult to spend £6.6 billion. That's been our experience over recent years. Unless you've got a plan that's well designed, that's got supply chains, that's got targeting, that's got delivery mechanisms, that brings in local authorities to have a proper plan that reflects their communities, you're going to find it difficult to spend that efficiently. I wish it was bigger, but I really hope that the Warm Home Plan gets articulated and developed in a way that it is, as Sam was saying, a response to particular communities and to particular types. On the point about the design of a social tariff, what we need is a really robust conversation about the mechanism that you can call it social discount or kind of social tariff, whatever it is. We just need to have a hard conversation. I support the lines that Maria was saying about how this is going to operate. Is it broad? Is it deep? Who gets brought in? What are the trade-offs? And because we haven't had, yes, you're right, we've talked about it a long time, we haven't had that hard-nosed conversation about how is it going to work, who's it going to support, how much support is it going to give, is it in the place of something else? We just need to have that consultation about how you get, in the architecture of our energy market, sufficient support for people who we know cannot afford to heat their homes.
Okay. Just comes to Jeevun, because I know you might have to
I think
dash off.
very quickly, on Devon's question, last one by Rob, I mean, the short answer is they're both going to be questions for ministers. Devon, I think whatever I put forward today might incur me spending money, and Rachel will be very angry with me. Rob, if you've already got Miata, I know Miata's going to be the person to talk to, and I have no doubt that she's considering these issues, and fundamentally, people may know that I used to work with Miata. Look, Miata and I both have the same aim as this Labour government, which is that every single person has affordable energy bills. I'm really, really happy she's in the ministry. Obviously, a brilliant boss, a massive, massive brain. On John's point in particular, I wouldn't equate the cost of not acting on health with the cost of investment. So the cost of the benefit, the idea of a cost-benefit ratio is precisely that. You can spend the 6.6 billion but have a benefit that's far greater, i.e. just because the total costs are 15.4 billion does not mean that 6.6 billion on insulating homes is not sufficient, therefore reduce to 15.4 on the other side. So those two figures don't quite add up in that particular regard. And it's also worth mentioning, of course, that the 15.4 billion are around coldness in general, whereas the 6.6 is just around insulation, i.e. if you're having warmer homes because you have lower bills, you're also actually having another way in which you're getting it. So it's not quite just the 6.6 matched the 5.4. More broadly, I would expect there to be quite a high cost-benefit ratio to this stuff, because as you get to the bottom, you start to get really high returns on investment. Here on insulation, of course, elsewhere, early years childcare is another key aspect of it. So yeah, thank you very much. I am sorry I have to rush off.
Yes,
Apologies. Thank you so much today.
Sam, did you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll do it in reverse order. Yeah, it's quite well. I think it's quite aligned. I think that expanding the eligibility criteria for the warmer homes discount, potentially also linking it to the same system they use for cold weather payments and so on. Because the point that I've argued in Parliament is we're not all equal in this. Like, I go down to London and I'm talking to my wife and she's telling me how cold it is when I'm on the phone to my wife, and I'm sitting there with the window open. Like, so not everyone's the same, and I think we've got the technology and the ability to work with energy companies, to look at postcodes, to look at temperatures. And I'll tell you that, 2 years ago, I had a period of unemployment through a winter. And when I got that text message telling me that it's cold enough, it's triggered a cold weather payment, we sighed relief and we went and turned the heating up a little bit. So I get that, and I think we do need to do that, and that's certainly what I had a meeting with Miato, and I've had a meeting with Rachel Reeves PPSs, and that's what I'm pushing for, and I hope that in the budget we see it. On the point of the home installation 6.2 billion, I wouldn't read too much into that figure, to be honest. It won't. That's what the budget is currently. But I think the challenge in the next 2 or 3 years is going to be getting supply chains in place and getting people skilled up to deliver, because we don't currently have the workforce that we need to deliver the Warm Homes Plan. And I think what we'll see is that as we demonstrate a capability to spend the money and to spend it well, and there is a risk of an underspend, and all across government, in previous government, there was underspends in dentistry, underspends in the agricultural support fund and so on, because people weren't able to draw down the funds available. So to me, the priority is to design it in a way that as the maximum number of people are able to access the support available, and max it out. And I think at the point where we've spent it all and when we've proven the value of it, future budgets will obviously have to increase that fund, and I think that will happen, because I think people will see that it was worth doing. And I didn't quite understand the point on universal credit. I apologise. I wasn't sure what.
So it's just that it already goes quite high up the income scale. So kind of saying that your constituents who are feeling like only those on means tested benefits get it. There are some tweaks you could make to better target universal credit, but it goes quite high. So if you're renting, if you've got kids, even in County Durham, you could be on 40,000 and still be eligible for a little bit potentially, right? It's just
So we say, but and I'm not sure this, but just getting a small amount of universal credit, I don't think that is an eligibility criteria for the Warmer Homes discount at the moment.
No, and that's I think Adam's point is about passporting. That's probably correct. And actually,
and to me that's the ask of government, and I've thought really serious about kind of what can I ask that I think they actually could deliver this budget, and to me that's the ask, is that fund increases.
Sam, just before, so we should have a longer conversation. That's basically what Policy and Practice has been working on the data piece as well.
Yes, and I'm aware of time, but Maria, I'll quickly give you the last word. No pressure.
I mean, just to respond to Devon's point, I think it's about working out whether it's better to put it on the income side or to cut the cost side of it. And there are probably arguments for doing a bit of both. But for reasons we've already kind of discussed about, particularly on pension credit, not the low take up of that. There are people on very low incomes who are not getting any benefits at the moment, so how do we reach those but automatically enrolling people who are eligible? And also the point about it not necessarily being related to energy need as well. Just to respond to the point about the design of the social tariff, I mean, again, I think we sort of get into semantics. I think when you look at like the warm discount, home discount, for example, if you had a tiered system for that, it would sort of start to get towards a social tariff. It doesn't really matter what we call it, as Adam says. We need to have a really good debate about all the options and get it all on the table and discuss the pros and cons, but with a commitment to doing something to help people afford their energy bills better.
Fantastic. Well, this a fascinating discussion, one we could continue indefinitely, I'm sure, but unfortunately there's a definite endpoint we have to stick to. So I'd like to once again thank our amazing speakers, and Caroline in particular, and thank NEA and Fair by Design for making this event possible.